can I say about Spider-Man that hasn't already been said? Spider-Man is so popular he's appeared in countless forms of other media. Movies, games, cartoons, popsicles, even Broadway musicals. It's like this guy thinks he's Shrek or something. Spider-Man was created very early in Marvel's history, in the year 1962, and was created by the team that brought you Doctor Strange and pretty much nothing else of value outside of those franchises. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. I don't know if it's possible to not know who he is, but if you don't, Spider-Man is a high school-age teen that is bit by a radioactive spider and given all the abilities of a spider. He can stick to walls, sense danger, and has an astonishing amount of strength for his small size, while sometimes having the ability to shoot webs from his wrists, which is more commonly replaced with manufactured web shooters. Famously played by Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland in live-action adaptations, Spider-Man has also been voiced by an amazing cast of voice actors such as Christopher Barnes, Neil Patrick Harris, Yuri Lowenthal, Chris Pine, and James Arnold Taylor. And that's just for Peter Parker Spider-Man. When it comes to video games, Spider-Man has always been on top. Games like the 2002 Spider-Man game that I've mentioned multiple times. But when it comes to games that people actually like, we have Spider-Man 2, Ultimate Spider-Man, Shattered Dimensions, and Maximum Carnage, which has also left its own little imprint on this channel. Spider-Man games were the ultimate superhero games before the Batman Arkham series came along, and have since dethroned that series with the release of Insomniac's Spider-Man. So I can't say anything about Spider-Man that hasn't already been said, but I can talk about a game that's been raved about since the year 2000. Spider-Man. Released on Nintendo 64, Game Boy Color, Dreamcast, Windows, and most famously, the PlayStation, Spider-Man 2000 was a spectacular game in its time for bringing all things Marvel to the world of gaming. And it was brought to gaming by a development team in its prime, Neversoft. A logo I hate, but a company I love. The now defunct Neversoft was the team responsible for creating the Tony Hawk's franchise. And other than that and Spider-Man, Neversoft never did much else outside of the Bruce Willis game and a couple of Guitar Heroes before Activision folded them into the Call of Duty giant that is Infinity Ward. Using the Tony Hawk's engine to run the game, Spider-Man takes place after the hero is well established in the world of superheroing as an adult. The voice cast of the game, while sounding like it was recorded on a tape recorder inside a Pepsi can, is compiled of actors from both the Spider-Man and Spider-Man Unlimited voice cast, and even though the characters look very similar to the ones featured in those series, the game has no connection to either of them. The main menu of the game is chock full of extras like different costumes to play in that are unlocked by doing various things throughout the game. A full character model viewer that has a short bio for each character, a little tidbit from Stan Lee himself, and a way too sexy Mary Jane pose. Comic covers for major issues from Spider-Man's history that can be collected throughout each level of the game, along with comic covers for each chapter. Hand-drawn storyboards for in-game cutscenes. There's also a training mode to brush up on all your spider skills. For the story, you have the option to pick from the normal difficulties, easy, medium, and hard, but also a kid mode that simplifies the game's controls to make it easier to play for children. When it comes to the story, a now reformed Dr. Otto Octavius, better known as Dr. Octopus, is hosting a demonstration at a science expo when Spider-Man attacks the crew and steals Otto's project, which is an issue because Peter Parker is in the crowd watching, but is unable to escape the crowd to change into his costume. This causes Spider-Man to be branded as a criminal after the imposter Spider-Man escapes. After the real Spider-Man is able to get into costume, a green fog is released onto the city streets, forcing Spider-Man to stick to the rooftops to stop a nearby bank robbery, which is a great Silent Hill type approach to early console hardware limitations of the time. Consoles like the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation weren't able to handle a realistic feeling New York street, but having a story reason for Spider-Man to not run the streets is a much better way than some other games I've mentioned too many times have handled it. The narration of the game is done by Stan Lee with a voice that always makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Once again, we find our hero Peter Parker, better known around the world as the Amazing Spider-Man, in a heap of trouble. But this is just the beginning, Spidey fans. So get ready for a true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns, more supervillains than you can shake a web at, and of course, non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action.
You then get a comic cover, as mentioned earlier, for the start of the current mission arc. When you take control of the character, Black Cat drops onto the rooftop and gives you a brief tutorial, and from there, you're free to roam the rooftops of New York to stop the robbery. You can walk into various question marks littered around for more information on how to play, or take the IKEA's not my boss approach and go for it with no instructions. The DualShock controller is supported so you can move Spidey around with either the directional arrows or the stick, which I find to be the easiest way to control the movement. Although, only the left stick is supported. No camera control functionality was added to the game, despite the DualShock controller releasing 3 years earlier. You can also jump, punch, shoot webs, and add directions to your attacks to do moves like the web dome or web spikes. Although, web attacks will consume web cartridges, but more can be picked up throughout the level. For navigation, other than running and jumping, you can zipline, crawl on walls crunched up like a frog, and you can also web swing to get around. But you can only web swing towards something you can land on, and only for 2 swings. After that, Spider-Man will fall. After completing each short level segment, you'll be given the option to save the game, where you can create a name for the save file to make it easy to find the right one later. Like the average 24-year-old man, I chose the name Butt, and... Oh, Spider-Man. Stop. Like the kid mode, Spider-Man has a censorship feature to keep kids from adding naughty words to the save list. Spider-Man will swoop in and slap the word so hard it changes to something appropriate. A feature you'd never know about if you weren't a toddler in an adult's body. The game's graphics are average for a PlayStation 1 game. Everything looks smushed in the face. The only parts that don't look smushed or blocky is Black Cat's overly sculpted cheeks that's the main focus of the camera during any scene she's not speaking in. Something Resident Evil 5 would go on to take out of the Spider-Man playbook 9 years later. Besides Black Cat, the cast of other Marvel characters featured in the game is sensational. You'll get cameos from Daredevil, the Punisher, the Human Torch, and Captain America, along with villains like Scorpion, what is that? Rhino, Venom, Mysterio, really why is that there? The Lizard, Dr. Octopus, Carnage, and Easter eggs and references like the Baxter Tower from the Fantastic Four being in the first level for you to swing to, and J. Jonah Jameson being enough of a Tony Hawk Pro Skater fan to play it at work. You'll go through each set of levels trying to clear Spider-Man's name and fighting through the members of the Jade Syndicate, various villains, henchmen, and symbiotes, with some excellent beat-em-up levels, chases, hostage rescue missions, and outrageously clever boss stages to track down who's framing Spider-Man and stop the symbiotic takeover. In the years since, Spider-Man has had a substantial amount of games, and each one being just as good as the last with a few standout titles that really shine. Sure, Neversoft Spider-Man doesn't hold a candle to Insomniac Spider-Man and Miles Morales, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game by any means. On average, PlayStation 1 games tend to feel dated and janky. They're usually hard to control and don't explain what to do very well, but none of those things are apparent in this game other than some stiff web shooter controls. You could plop the controller in the hand of any Fortnite Minecraft playing kid today, and they could play it without any issues outside of the visuals. I could see some parts being difficult for children to do, but throwing them into kid mode should fix that. A sequel to this game called Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro was released just 1 year later by the king of the modern remake, Vicarious Visions, who have single-handedly brought the 90s classics back to gaming with their remake of Crash Bandicoot that inspired giants like Spyro and Tony Hawk to make a return as well. Neversoft Spider-Man is a great game to go back to, whether it's for the nostalgia of renting it from the family video to play on the N64 all night in your basement with your brother, or just to see how Spider-Man games have evolved over the past 20 years, along with how much they perfected so early on. And if you wanted to see any other Spider-Man games made throughout his almost 40 years of video game history covered in a video like this, you can always request a topic by commenting it below. And if you subscribe, maybe I won't tell Spider-Man to slap you so hard you become something appropriate. Go play Spider-Man.
Kid mode!
Kid mode! Kid mode!
Kid mode!
Kid mode! Kid mode!